Listen up, because what went down on SportsCenter's Emergency Raiders Colts preview coverage is going to make you understand just how desperate this situation in Las Vegas has become. And I'm not talking about some casual, they need a win type of analysis. We're talking about a team sitting at 1-3, where dropping to 1-4 means your playoff probability plummets to a statistically insignificant 5%, where Geno Smith is leading the entire NFL in interceptions with 7 through 4 games, where Colton Miller's injury has forced Stone Forsythe, essentially a Brandon Parker clone, into starting at left tackle against a Colts pass rush that's been effective all season. When Scott Van Pelt started breaking down the keys to victory that Las Vegas absolutely must execute if they want any chance of staying alive in this season, I had to pause my coffee, because this isn't just another Week 5 matchup. This is organizational survival. This is Pete Carroll's entire regime hanging by a thread. This is the difference between salvageable disappointment and complete catastrophic failure. Hey Raiders fans! If you're following along with this analysis, I have a dream: to hit 1,000 subscribers on this channel. It would be incredible to have you on this journey with me. Go ahead and subscribe, hit that notification bell, and let's grow together. Your subscription means the world to me and the future of this channel. Now, let's keep going because there's still so much more to discuss. So I'm watching SportsCenter right as they're setting up their Raiders coverage during the afternoon show, and suddenly the entire panel shifts into emergency triage mode because the analytics are so brutal, the quarterback situation is so precarious, and the offensive line compromises are so significant that even the most optimistic Raiders fans have to acknowledge they're staring into the abyss. When you've got a team that's 1-3 playing on the road against a 3-1 Colts squad that's leading the NFL in explosive plays and yards per play, while your quarterback can't stop turning the ball over, and your best offensive lineman is watching from the sideline with a high ankle sprain and hairline fracture, you're not just facing an uphill battle. You're facing a mathematical cliff where one more loss essentially ends your season before Halloween even arrives. Let me paint you the complete picture of what really transpired during this segment, because the surface-level Raiders need to protect the ball and run the football analysis that you're hearing everywhere completely misses the psychological pressure on Geno Smith, the schematic adjustments Chip Kelly needs to make to account for offensive line limitation, the defensive game plan Patrick Graham has to implement to neutralize Jonathan Taylor, and the harsh reality that this is legitimately the biggest game of the season for a franchise that's already on life support just 4 games into a supposed rebuild year. This is about whether Pete Carroll's philosophy can actually work in modern NFL football, or whether the Raiders just hired a 74-year-old coach whose best days are decades behind him. Here's the foundational key that had the entire SportsCenter panel in complete agreement. And honestly, this is so obvious that it barely needs stating, but apparently needs to be screamed from the rooftops until Geno Smith actually hears it. No turnover. That's it. That's the entire offensive game plan in capital letters. Geno Smith leads the NFL with 7 interceptions through 4 games. And if the Raiders had played turnover-free football from the quarterback position, they'd be 3-1 instead of 1-3. Every single loss this season can be directly traced back to catastrophic quarterback mistakes that either gave opponents short fields or directly resulted in points. Stephen A. Smith was going absolutely nuclear during his breakdown about how Geno is forcing throws downfield when teams are playing too high safety looks specifically designed to bait him into making exactly those mistakes. Defenses are dropping 7 or 8 defenders into coverage, bringing minimal pressure, and daring Geno to take the underneath checkdowns rather than trying to thread needles into tight windows 15-20 yards downfield. But Geno either doesn't see the checkdowns, doesn't trust them, or stubbornly believes he can beat coverage with arm talent alone. The result is turnover after turnover in situations where taking the 5-yard gain would have kept drives alive and allowed the offense to methodically move the football. The Ashton Ginty feature discussion became the second non-negotiable key to victory. And Kendrick Perkins was making this point about how when your quarterback is struggling with decision-making, and your offensive line is compromised by injury, you lean even harder on the running game to control tempo, shorten the game, and take pressure off everyone else. Ginty exploded last week with 155 total yards and 3 touchdowns, including 2 receiving scores that showed his versatility as a receiver out of the backfield. He averaged 6.6 yards per carry against Chicago, which suggests the Raiders' offensive line can create running lanes when they commit to it schematically. The Colts' run defense is significantly better than Chicago's. They're allowing just 96 rushing yards per game, which ranks in the top third of the league, but that doesn't mean you abandon the ground game entirely. It means you feature Ginty early and often, you establish that you're committed to running even if the first few carries don't break big, and you force Indianapolis to load the box, which then creates one-on-one matchups on the outside for your receivers. If Chip Kelly's game plan doesn't revolve around getting Ginty 20-plus touches, it's the wrong game plan for this specific matchup, given all the other variables working against Las Vegas. The Jack Bech discussion revealed some interesting behind-the-scenes thinking about the wide receiver rotation, and this is where you see coaching staffs making difficult decisions about which young players deserve expanded opportunity. Pete Carroll has hinted multiple times this week that Bech is going to get additional reps at the expense of Dante Thornton Jr., which represents a significant philosophical shift given how much the organization has invested in Thornton's development. But the film and the analytics tell a clear story. Bech has been significantly more effective in his limited snaps. The separation numbers that got put up on screen were damning for Thornton. He's creating less space against coverage, his catch percentage is just 35.7% on target, and his overall PFF grade is a mediocre 53.4 compared to Bech's 70.6. When you factor in run blocking, where Bech has also graded out better despite fewer opportunities, it becomes clear that the coaching staff needs to adjust playing time to reflect performance, rather than draft capital investment or preseason expectation. The Brock Bowers target discussion had the entire panel in agreement that this is borderline organizational malpractice at this point. Bowers is one of the most talented pass-catching weapons in the entire NFL. He's creating 2.26 yards of separation per route, which ranks 6th among all tight ends and wide receivers league-wide. And yet, he's not consistently getting 10-plus targets per game the way elite offensive weapons should. Chip Kelly, Pete Carroll, and even Geno Smith have all said this week they want to get Bowers more involved, but talking about it and actually executing it are two completely different things. Here's what really frustrates me about the Bowers usage. He's clearly not 100% healthy. You can see it in his movement and his inability to stretch the field vertically the way he did early in the season, but he's still creating more separation than almost anyone else on the roster. If a compromised Bowers is this effective, imagine what he'd do if the offensive scheme actually prioritized getting him the football in space where he can make plays after the catch. 10 targets should be the floor, not the ceiling. And if the Raiders can't figure out how to consistently involve their best offensive weapon, that's a damning indictment of the coaching staff's ability to scheme players open. The defensive keys got extensive coverage because this is where the Raiders actually have some leverage if they execute properly. The first and most obvious key: make Daniel Jones beat you through the air rather than letting Jonathan Taylor dominate on the ground. Taylor leads the entire NFL in rushing yards. He's averaging over 5 yards per carry. And Indianapolis's entire offensive identity revolves around establishing the run and then attacking off play action when defenses cheat up to stop it. Patrick Graham needs to put 8 or even 9 defenders in the box on early down. Use Isaiah Pola-Mao and Jamal Adams as quasi-linebackers who can provide run support, and force Daniel Jones to prove he can consistently execute in obvious passing situations. If Jones beats you by throwing for 300 yards and 3 touchdowns, you tip your cap and acknowledge he played out of his mind. But you cannot, absolutely cannot, let Taylor run for 150 yards and completely dictate the game's tempo and style. Here's what really emerged from the entire SportsCenter coverage that I think Raiders fans need to internalize. This is a must-win game in the truest sense of that overused phrase. and the margin for error is essentially zero. Geno Smith cannot turn the ball over even once. The offensive line has to protect despite losing Colton Miller. Ashton Jeanty needs 20-plus touches. Brock Bowers demands double-digit targets. The defense has to limit explosive plays and force Daniel Jones to beat them rather than Jonathan Taylor. If all of those things happen, the Raiders have a legitimate chance to escape Indianapolis with a 24-23 victory that keeps their season alive. But if even one of those keys breaks down, if Geno throws a pick six or the offensive line crumbles or Taylor gashes them for 150 yards, this season is effectively over at 1-4 with nowhere to go but down.